And that's doing its thing. Awesome. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the May edition of the Vermont Interlibrary Loan Roundtable. My name is Carolyn Mark, and I'm the Interlibrary Loan and Government Services Librarian here with the Department of Libraries. I really appreciate everybody taking the time out of your sunny morning to get together and talk a little bit about interlibrary loan and what's up at your library. I was thinking just as like a starting point, if folks want to feel free to introduce themselves. I don't want to put anybody on the spot and call on folks, but if you want to like raise a hand or just unmute yourselves and say, hey, hello, your name and what library you're joining us from, that'd be awesome.
Hi, I'm Wendy, since I'm already unmuted.
Hey, Wendy.
I'm at Bent Northrop Memorial Library up in Fairfield.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
I also have a Christmas tree still up.
And we've got a couple of responses in the chat. I just wanted to share. Tenzin says good morning, and Kat from from Middlebury and from Russell Memorial in Moncton says that sorry she's micless and cameraless. And Tenzin is joining us from Fletcher Free in Burlington this morning too in the chat. So thanks for sending your greetings.
Hi everyone, my name's Sky Peebles. I'm down in Rockingham Free Public Library in Bellows Falls.
Hey Sky, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for hosting.
Good morning. My name is Scott Lovelet, and I have the very fancy title of Head of Resource Sharing at the University of Vermont Libraries. We encompass both Howe and the Dana Health Sciences Library. So nice to see you all.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Scott.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Jean Carr. I'm the director at Vernon Free Library. So I do all the interlibrary loan.
Good morning, Jean. Thanks for
Also.
joining.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jane from the Free Library, and I'm the interlibrary loan specialist here, and I wear many other hats.
Awesome. Thanks, Noreen.
Hi, my name is Michelle Whalen. I'm from Vermont State University on the Randolph Center campus.
Hi, Michelle. This is great, getting to put faces with names. Excellent. And from the
hi,
go ahead, Jean. Sorry.
I'm Jenny from the McCullough Library in North Bennington.
Good morning, Jenny. Thanks for coming.
Hi, I'm Betsy from the Bradford Public Library.
Hey, Betsy.
Hi, and I'm at the desk today, so I might have to pop in and out.
That's all good. Thank you for coming.
Are you calling on folks, or we just hop
just
up
chime in whenever you're ready. Yeah, it's kind of just.
I'm
you know,
also
as you
on
go.
Vermont State University, but I'm at the Johnson campus. Interlibrary loan.
And I'm Jenny from the Charlotte Library, Interlibrary Loans.
Hey, Jenny. And just sharing one from the chat, Michelle says hi from Fletcher Memorial in Ludlow. Hi, Michelle. All right, and I think if everyone's had a chance to introduce themselves that wanted to, let's see where's a good starting point. I have a agenda that I typed up. Let me see if I can toss that into the chat really quickly, just so that folks have a copy, and I can also share my screen. 1 second. All right, I'm going to go ahead and try the screen share. Okay, are folks able to see? It should just be my desktop right now. Okay, cool. Haven't done this live in a little bit. Okay, and are folks able to see the agenda now? Okay. Just gotta let someone in the meeting. Cool. All right. Are folks able to see the agenda that I have here from my OneDrive? Okay, awesome. Thanks. So I thought I'd start just with like an open discussion, some Q&A. I had learned that my predecessor, April, typically led the group in reviewing the interlibrary loan best practices document. So sort of like an open conversation about that. I have some questions and discussion points that I thought I'd save for a little bit later, and then wrapping things up as we go. So one comment that I had received via email was from Kelly Johnson at the MMU High School Library. And while it was specific to her experience, I thought I would share it here just with the group because I think it kind of applies to everybody in the interlibrary loan community. So Kelly had asked, when sending items over to MMU High School, please include a mailing return label. Kelly is continuing to receive ILL books without a mailing return label included with the book. And she says, it's so helpful to have a return address as I'm not a courier library and I want to make sure that I'm mailing the books back to the correct library. So that was something that she had shared with me. And I asked, is it cool if I share this out at the round table? I think this might apply to other folks. And Kelly was gracious and comfortable with doing so. So I thought that I'd just bring that up as like a opening sort of topic point. So I'm going to head back over here and stop sharing. And I should be back. Okay, cool. So that was the first little item on the agenda that I wanted to bring forth, but I thought I'd come back on camera and just see if folks had any open Q&A questions just to get started before we jump into the ILL best practices annual review. Or just like anything that's been up at your library, interesting things that have been requested in interlibrary loan or any odds and ends. Yeah, Wendy?
I miss the go back button on our Clover in the new version.
Okay. And so
I miss the go back button.
and this is a good learning opportunity for me. How long has that been gone? Or like when was it last available?
Since the last update.
Okay. So this is
When
pretty
they
recent.
when they combined the incoming and outgoing box for the lender versus when that combined, it went away. The go back button went away. And
Okay.
so now we just have to go. Yeah, it was just easier to hit the go back button and it would clear. Now we have to like go back using the button itself to go back into it, and then we have to clear it, and then it's just a matter of flow. It's simple enough to do, but it's just a matter of workflow. When you get used to something, it just it's not there anymore. It's like, oh God.
Yeah, and you get used to having something and like your click, you just know where you're gonna route your cursor to, and then it's like, oh wait, where did that go? Yeah,
I need to
I get
regain
that. Yeah.
that millisecond or two.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just made a note of that, and I really appreciate you sharing that with me, and as well as all of the feedback that folks have been sharing about recent autographics updates and some of the quirks that have been coming up with them. I've been sharing feedback that has been coming in on the listserv and individually, and I will also share feedback from the roundtable today with autographics. So just trying to get together some points for them to consider about potential enhancements or things that have been incorporated into recent updates that aren't quite feeling as updates for the people that are boots on the ground. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Wendy, and I'll pass that along for sure. Oh, Sky, did you have a question?
Sorry, I'm in my browser, so my buttons are in different places. Hi, I just had I'm relatively new to the ILL. How shall we say? Like I'm like an ILL junior ranger. Let's say that.
Okay,
So I'm
I like
figuring,
that.
yeah. So we're working through it. But I had a question about the most recent list for courier libraries, because on the website, I think the most recent one is from October 2024. And I don't, for example, know that like Linden and Johnson are on there, or the Howe at UVM. So I was wondering what the where would I find like the most recent current, because I want to make sure that I'm always sending things that should be in the courier to the courier. But I also wasn't sure if there is a list of, because there's a list of courier libraries, but is there also a list of non-courier libraries that sort of between the two of them, we can figure out what is the best method for sending things?
Gotcha. Okay. So the last update to that document was made before I started, I believe in the fall for the courier member list. So that's something that I'm happy to revisit and update. I made a quick note of those libraries that you mentioned that weren't included, Linden, Johnson, and Howe, and I'll make sure that those are added. Oh, Scott just put a link in the
Thank,
chat. Yeah, thank you, Scott. That's excellent.
No problem.
Yeah.
thanks, Scott.
And for what it's worth, I generally go directly to the PDF page,
Yep.
which seems to be the most accessible for me. But you do you, obviously.
Yeah, so on this page that Scott put in the chat, about half-ish, three-quarters of the way down, there's the courier delivery schedule and labels, and it looks like that was last updated on October 14th. So definitely due for a refresh. I'll make that a
Okay.
priority, and I will share out on the listserv when it's updated. I'll attach a PDF to that email, and I'll also link back to this page that Scott graciously shared in the chat. So thank you. Yeah, definitely want to keep that up to date so folks know. And Tenzin shared a comment. We use the address from the printout from Clover if we don't have the return mailing label for local libraries, but it's challenging if it's out of state. Yeah, thank you, Tenzin. I think that's a great point. And if you ever have a book that you're sending back out of state, or like the label has been lost in the midst or whatever, feel free to reach out to myself or the LIB contact email address, whatever's handy, and we can look up in OCLC the lending or borrowing library's address and get that back to you. And Kat also followed up in the chat and shared that we print the updated PDF whenever it gets updated. It's handy to have next to our bins for double checks. I think April used to give us a heads up every time it was updated. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. As soon as I get this updated, I'll make a goal to get that done before the end of the week. I'll follow up on the ILL listserv, and I guess the courier listserv too would probably be a good place for that. And I'll put that up on the website as well. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And Jenny, you have a hand raised. If you'd like to ask your question, feel free.
All right, sorry about that.
Hey,
Don't
that's
seem to
all
have
good.
a camera, no camera this morning. But anyway, I wanted to toss this question in. It's sort of outside of what we're discussing right now, but I just was curious to know if there are any updates on this discussion can happen later, but or maybe happens elsewhere, but on the cutting of the federal funds for interlibrary loans and where that stands and what will it affect and what libraries are doing to respond to this. So I just wanted to toss that question in there for some discussion at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's top of mind, I think, for all of us. And I'm happy to share the information that I have available. My current understanding is that right now we have received the initial half of the allotment for the upcoming fiscal year, and it's seeming pretty in a pretty positive direction that we're going to be getting the second allotment based on the communications from our state librarian, Catherine Delneo. And she's been sharing out information about the current state of the funding, both on the what is it, the VTLIB listserv, like the general all libraries listserv, as well as the recent VTLIB newsletter. And so my current understanding is that for the upcoming fiscal year, we will be offering interlibrary loan programs as they've been offered throughout the year. As far as the fiscal year that would be beginning in July of 2026. I think that we're still waiting to hear information about that fiscal year in particular, but my current understanding is that funding for this coming fiscal year is secured to the point where there is currently no funding cuts that would be impacting interlibrary loan or the courier funding or any associated grants with either of those offerings within the department. And so if folks have other questions, I'm happy to elaborate, but that's my current understanding with the limited information that we know. Of course, with the layoffs at the IMLS, our points of contact have changed and there's a lot up in the air. So we've been working with, some delayed communication and trying to keep the library community as informed as possible with the just with the current situation, and it's different.
Okay.
Yeah, different
It's on now.
faculties. Yeah.
Sorry to be late.
Oh, hello.
Thanks
Thanks
the
for
update.
joining us. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and Tenzin asked, can we have an updated list for courier libraries since one of the libraries is not on the courier? So sorry, I forgot who it was. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be putting together some updates for that list and sharing it out on the listserv and the website later this week. Just from the notes I quickly jotted down, I think it was Lyndon, Johnson, and Howe at UVM are the newbies that will be added, but I'll double check those and confirm that those are the ones that are going to go onto the document. And Kat had shared, we much appreciate the updates on the IMLS situation as it continues. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share any information that I can. And if folks would like to join any of those listservs, like if you're like, oh, I didn't see that email or whatever, feel free to send me a message after the meeting or anytime that's convenient for you. And I can help you to get set up with those different listservs and newsletters, both for the department newsletter that goes for the courier listserv, the ILL listserv. We're always happy to help folks get connected in the community with whatever information they need. So, Jenny, did you have another question? Sorry, or is your hand was still raised? I just wanted to double check before I move on to another person. Okay, I think it might be a lingering hand. So, Alice, would you like to ask your question next?
Did you say you were going to add Johnson to the non-courier list?
Oh, to the courier list.
No, we're not on the courier.
Oh, not on it. Okay, then
This is
thank
the
you.
Johnson library that's part of VTSU, not the
Okay.
Johnson Public Library that just rolled down the street on wheels. Not that one.
All right, got it. Thank you for the clarification on that. I really appreciate it.
I'm not aware that any of the VTSU libraries branches are on the courier.
I don't believe they are. I think those are USPS deliveries. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Alice.
Yep.
Great. I'll make a note of that too. Yeah, I think that document's ready for a refresh. And I will put together a list of non-courier libraries too. I think that's also helpful, so that folks know like, hey, this is definitely going to be a USPS or your preferred postal provider. Okay. And Tammy's joining us. I just let her into the meeting. Good morning, Tammy.
Morning.
All right. Cool, cool. And do folks have any other questions before? I just want to give everybody a chance in case there were other like open topics. Yeah.
Chris is trying to join as well.
Oh, I don't have anyone else in the waiting room. That's odd. Georgia Public Library, I'm letting someone in from there right now.
Okay. I just wanted to ask really quickly about the courier system. So of course, I mean, it's great. It's certainly a value, and you certainly can't beat the convenience. But we do from time to time have stuff that, and you've seen the emails go out on the listserv, this book is missing. We can't find it. We can't track it down. So is there a, I'm just curious if there's any way to sort of find out what happened to that lost stuff, or if there's a way to kind of track it down. I mean, the listserv seems like it goes, pretty well, but we've definitely had a few instances of stuff just disappearing and never coming back. And I'm curious if there's if anyone has a method that they've used to sort of track that stuff down, or if we have to just kind of go on faith.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. I think that's a great question. I'm happy to share like what I personally do at my desk when I see one of those come up on the listserv, and then if other folks want to chime in with their experience, I think that'd be awesome too. But when I see one of those emails come up on like the Courier, or the ILL listserv, that there's a book that's lost in the mix, I email our contact at Priority Express and I say, this book was on its way from this library to this library on this date. Could you please check the bins? And oftentimes, I'll get a response and it's like, yeah, we'll keep an eye out for it. And to be completely honest, most of the time, um, they have not turned up like individual missing books. And I do think that some of the other books eventually get shuffled along in the route. And I think that there are times that I don't receive a follow-up. And so this is something that I've been thinking about um, a lot since I've been getting started and settling in and looking for different opportunities to like improve the services that we're providing, would be to try to figure out some sort of tracking system for the books that are getting lost. Something that I do have that I inherited from my predecessor, April, is a missorts report, which is operating sort of in parallel to those one-off emails. So if someone emails the ILL listserv and they're like, oh, this book has been lost for a couple of months, I'll email Priority and say, could you keep an eye out for this? The other component of that is every month, and I so appreciate everybody submitting your courier stats. There's a little blip in that form that mentions, did you have any missorts or did any books go to another area? And I also report all of those entries from that like line to a missorts report, and that gets sent to Priority Express every month. And that spreadsheet includes the book titles, how many books were lost, where they were going to, where they ended up, where they were supposed to be in a couple of columns, along with the date. And Priority is using that to look for patterns and see like, are there particular bins that are getting mixed up in a pattern from week to week? Is it libraries with like similar sounding or similar spelling names that are getting mixed up? And they've been working on that for a couple of years. And, my understanding is that there's less missorts than there used to be, just looking at the spreadsheet from like a couple of years ago. But it's frustrating when books get lost. It's collections that you want to be a good steward of. So I'm definitely trying to figure out a method for tracking that moving forward. So I really appreciate you bringing it up. And I'm sorry that I don't have like a perfect answer, but it is something that I'm actively trying to work on. Yeah.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. And if other folks are like have a method that they use for tracking those books or anything that they'd like to share, I'm all ears, because this is something that's on my like project list for the next year, is trying to figure out just a better, more manageable workflow for keeping track of those materials. Oh, another question, Jenny? Yeah.
I did have a question. In Clover, well, we've had a number of at least a few books that have been damaged, so we resolved with the libraries. But I've not been sure exactly how to respond in Clover, because it gives the option of lost or returned, and I think often I've just said returned, but I don't know if there's any reason I can make a note in it as well that it was replaced or paid for or something like that. But is that a good way? What's the best way to deal with those books?
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't know if I can speak to the best way, but I can speak to what we've been doing at the department. So for like the Department of Libraries Accounts in Clover, if there's a book that has gone lost and it's been paid or not paid, or there's something in limbo, we typically keep it in the lost folder, and then we'll add a lender's note. So like, for example, like patron paid $15 on this date for the book, and it'll remain in the lost folder. I think typically we don't check them in as returned after the fine has been paid. I'm not 100% on that, but most of the ones that I've seen in the Department of Libraries lost folders in Clover have just a little bit of a note explaining if it was lost, if a fine was charged, and just a little bit of context for any staff who might come across it. But if other people have like other things that they do, I'm totally all ears too. So. And if there's anything at any point that I'm explaining where it's not making sense, I am able to screen share and have learned how to do it since the last roundtable with ease. So I'm happy to pull up Clover this time and not just talk about what it would be like to see it in Clover, but I can actually show you today. So if you have questions, in that avenue, just let me know. And oh, Kat followed up in the comment chat and said, we usually keep requests active in buildership status until it's either paid or replaced, then we'll finish the request. And that's a great workflow too. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Kat. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you for all of your questions. Does anyone else have any other talking points or questions? There's going to be other opportunities to ask questions at the end too. I just wanted to make sure that I gave folks as much time as possible before we jump into the ILL best practices review. All right, cool. So if we're feeling ready, so my understanding, and this is coming into as a total newbie, is that there's this Vermont Interlibrary Loan Best Practices document. I'll share it in the screen in a moment. My understanding was that each year the Vermont Interlibrary Loan Roundtable reviews this annually in May. It's a pretty brief document, about a page and a half, just with some talking points about how to make interlibrary loan flow really well in the state of Vermont for everybody. So I thought I could share my screen and I'll read through it briefly. And, if folks have talking points or like questions or thoughts of maybe this is something that we could consider changing this year, feel free to like unmute yourselves or raise your hands or whatever. And we can just kind of go over it as we go. Yeah, I think that'll work. So I'm going to share my screen with fingers crossed. Okay, and are folks able to see the best practices document? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm just gonna start reading it down and feel free to unmute yourself. I have like a tiny Teams window in the right-hand side of my screen, so I should be able to see if folks are like raising their hands or putting questions in the chat. But again, it's my first time with this, so I really appreciate y'all's patience. So anyway. Vermont Interlibrary Loan Best Practices. Again, the top of the document just has a little bit of an introduction saying that the Interlibrary Loan Vermont Roundtable created these, that you can send any feedback or suggestions to me with my email address. And there's a reminder that's sent to the Interlibrary Loan listserv every 6 months. I'm going to begin sending that Interlibrary Loan listserv reminder from like 6 months after I send out the revision, if that makes sense. So if we make any revisions, I'll send out a link to this revised copy, and then 6 months after that, I'll set calendar reminders so that folks are getting a reminder of where the best practices document is, and that if you have any feedback or thoughts about changes, that you can always reach out to me. I'm here to help. All right. And so again, this is something that has been in place for a little while now, I believe, but I just wanted to go over it and make sure that things were still making sense and aligning with everybody's practices. Okay, so it looks like one of the first items is don't request items if you don't lend them, new items, audiovisual, DVDs, etc. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Pretty much with the new items, it seems that a lot of libraries have those marked as non-lending. So if your library has
Is that
an
a,
item marked as non-lending, then I think the understanding
Okay.
would be that we don't borrow them. And again, I'm just going to run through this, but feel free to be like, hey, or raise your hand if you'd like to call particular attention to a line item. All right, the next one is make sure to check Clover at least twice a week. And so that's just to keep up with requests. And I believe that for folks who are receiving the courier grant, I can double check on this. I think that that might be a requirement for participating in the courier program and receiving the courier grant is that you are checking Clover just at least twice a week to make sure that you don't have any outstanding requests or overdues. The next item is to check all statuses to make sure that your requests are up to date. Make sure contact information is included in your participant record, especially an email address. If at any point folks would like a tutorial for how to access the participant record or update your email address, please let me know. That's something that I'm happy to put a couple of screenshots together of with some captions and send out on the ILL list. Or I could probably put like a video recording too of my screen or something like that. So, and that goes across the board for anything that you're seeing here. If there's any points in the best practices document that you'd benefit from additional clarification from, please feel free to reach out. All right, so moving along, setting days to respond to match the number of days requests are processed so that the requests do not sit with you for several weeks. I think folks have been pretty consistent about that, and I haven't seen any issues coming up with that. And then there's just a screenshot here of the participant record that would show what that looks like on the user side. If you share a catalog with a library, do not use that library's barcode to create an ILL record in your library when checking out to a patron. The next point, if paperwork, sleeves, book straps are included when an item is received, please make sure they are included when the item is returned. If you have added your own bands or book straps, please remove before returning the item and do not add labels to books belonging to other libraries. Okay, that makes sense. Suggested information to include when lending an item is the due date, the request number, the borrowing library, or a checkout slip if your ILS prints out this information. Make sure Clover and ILS due dates match if possible. I believe there's a tutorial on the Clover webpage for this, and that's something that I'm happy to share out with the meeting notes after today's meeting. I think it has a couple of tutorials for different ILSs, how to make your due dates line up with what's in Clover. The suggested loan period is at least 45 days, but this is up to individual libraries. Do not request a new title until it has been published for 60 days to allow time for processing and local use. Double check that you are sending the item to the correct library, checking the courier and the shipping label. And it's not on the document, but just as an aside, if you don't know the shipping label or you're not sure where a book is supposed to go, feel free to reach out to myself at my email address anytime or the general lab.contact@vermont.gov address, and the staff would be happy to help you get your book back on its way. Include a return label when sending an item out, both courier and USPS. And that's kind of going back to the first talking point that I shared from a librarian at a school library in Vermont when we opened today's meeting, just to please include a return label so that it's easy for folks to know where the books are supposed to be going. And if something that was received that was meant for another library, please forward to the correct library indicated on the paperwork. Oops, sorry about that. To the correct library indicated on the paperwork if paperwork is included. Also, please reach out to me at my email address. And so it looks like this was first put into place a little bit ago, going on 5 years, and it was last reviewed just about a year ago. And the document was updated to include my contact information shortly after I started. So that's the whole document. And it looks like we have a question. So if you'd like to feel free to ask, and I'll keep the document open so that we can refer to whatever line item is most pertinent to your question. Go ahead.
Hi. So pertaining to the return labels, which I agree are wonderful and should be included, at past ILL roundtables, there's been, concerns raised about putting the return label in the same pocket behind the label that's directed to the library, because sometimes the labels fall out of the pockets and then you have two labels that the courier needs to figure out, and that can be challenging. And so at a certain point, it was agreed that the label should go inside the book, either inside the plastic of the front cover, if it's a book with a cover, or tucked in like a bookmark. And I just wanted to make sure that we're doing, how we're supposed to handle that, because it was my understanding that we shouldn't put that return label in that pocket behind the other label. Likewise, we were in the past printing labels where it would have our return on the back side of the label, and that also created confusion when labels fell out. So just trying to get a little clarity on that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So I just took a couple of notes, and I'll go back through and review some of the previous interlibrary loan like roundtables and see if I can come across like the meeting summaries that discussed that. But I think that what you're sharing makes a lot of sense. If other folks have comments or might have been at that meeting where that was discussed, I'd be curious to hear what you have to say too. But I think that it makes sense to put the label inside of the book or inside of the plastic. Don't put the return label in the pocket, and potentially to have it be acting as like a bookmark. I think those would be appropriate, and I'll incorporate those couple of points into a draft for updating this. Oh, Noreen, if you'd like to go ahead.
Put them right back so people aren't taking them out. And if it's upside down in the pocket, people seem to take that out. So I don't know. Whatever we decide on, make sure you look in the book for the return label, because I just keep getting them back and reuse them.
It might be my connection or being a little bit spotty, but would you mind repeating that? It was just a little bit tricky to hear what you were saying. Sorry about that.
No problem. Putting them in the book or in the front cover are return labels, and they weren't getting used. They were just coming back to me. And it seems like when I put them upside down in the pocket of the envelope of the bag, that it gets used more.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'd say. Yeah.
Okay.
Would you have the date?
It was a little bit tricky to hear the last part of
it?
what you said. Sorry about that, Noreen. I'm not sure if it's my connection or yours. You were asking something about a date?
When you send a return label for your library, could you have the date erased off so that we can use it?
Oh, okay.
Again, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Noreen. I just made a note of that, and I'll include that in the meeting summary too. Thanks for that suggestion. Oh, Sky, you have a hand raised?
Hi, thank you. Can I ask a question just to kind of understand what other people do in terms of their ILL workflow? So like when I send books out, I always put the label inside the book because what happens when I get ILL envelopes and I unpack them is that then the envelopes go on like a shelf and they aren't necessarily correlated with the book that they came in. So then it's actually would be more work for me to figure out which like book goes with the return label ultimately. So I'm wondering what other people's workflow is like that So how do you keep the envelope connected to the item that then circulates and then goes back? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yes,
Because
and I'm actually wondering the same thing. So
I'm
if folks,
curious.
yeah, I'm really curious to
Yeah,
hear too. If
'cause that's what,
anyone, yeah.
please, thank you.
Mhm. And I see a hand raised from Georgia Public Library. Please feel free to chime in and unmute yourself.
Hi, at the risk of being the radical librarian, here's what we really do. We have stacks of green, red, and purple envelopes, and we have file boxes that are alphabetized with little stick-up tags for each of the libraries. So we're part of the Catamount Consortium. We have one file box for Catamount, one file box for Clover, and I do not put the labels inside the books. I put them backwards. One, the library that it's going to, one from our library, and we send out a lot of books twice a week, and I have very little problems. So I know that goes against what we may be supposed to do or common practice here, but it seems to work for us, and it's really not that cumbersome.
Yeah, that's all about what works for you. And I really appreciate you sharing your workflow. Yeah. And if that's helping you to, keep track of everything, I think that sounds great. Oh, we've got some comments too in the meeting chat. I'm just going to read through from BPL Library Shares. I store labels in an old Rolodex box. I take labels out of pockets and store the bags in a drawer. I keep paperwork in a folder. We basically have no storage space. Yeah, I get that. And Wendy shared, we do that too. Tammy said that Springfield does that too. Jean chiming in, we do that too, and it works well. And Michelle down at Fletcher says that Fletcher Memorial follows the same as Georgia. We use book straps for all of our outgoing ILLs. It's great when they're left on the book when it comes back. Kat says, heck yes, bootstraps, book straps. Yeah, I think the book straps are great. So I really appreciate, your feedback. I'm gonna look into this a little bit more and come up with just some notes that I'll share in the meeting summary about this. Just kind of summarizing ideas of what folks are doing at different libraries to take into consideration for the best practices. And Kat followed up and said that they make the ILL super easy to find and identify who's borrowing and who's lending. Yeah, that sounds great. Something that's simple, straightforward. And she's saying that find would be differentiating from your local collection. Awesome. All right. And so I have a couple of things on the agenda. Let me go back to screen sharing once again. Thank you for bearing with me. Oh, a question popped in. Let me look at this. Oh, Sky says, thank you all. We do a combination of these and it seems to work well. Appreciate the ideas. Yeah, thank you, Sky, and thank you for the great question. I really appreciate the great discussion today. And Alice asks, when you mark an item returned in Clover, don't you then have the option to print out a return label? I believe so, but I'm not positive, and I will look into this and I will follow up in the meeting summary with an exact answer on that.
I use them all the time.
Okay, so then there we go. Thank you. That's a great tip. Yes.
If you're having to mail something back to someone, that is where they will come up. When you go to print shipping labels, if you've marked something returned, you'll have a return label in there that you can copy paste onto your label producer or whatever you use, or you can just print it out.
Awesome. And that's the USPS label that is generated?
Yep.
Cool. Thanks very much. That was just one of the questions that came
I
up
don't
in
know
the
what
chat.
happens with the courier people, if it tells you what bin to put it or directions.
Yeah, my understanding is that it'll give you the library name and then you refer to the PDF that's posted on the website and that will soon be updated. So. Awesome. Oh, and Wendy says, can we remind people why we suggest a 45-day return? All right. To be completely honest, I'm not quite sure why it's at 45-day returns. My understanding was that that was just like the loan period that has been carried through, and I think it's to allow for like the request delay and like the shipping delay too. But if folks have other comments, that's something that I can look a little bit into and report back on.
Well, once upon a time, we had another courier, and they were more efficient in getting books to us.
Okay.
Yeah, once upon a time, I could order a book and it would be here. It would be to us. We're just a once a week library pickup. So it would be to us either the following week or the week after that. It never went more than that. And if it did, you knew there was a problem. Unfortunately, that old courier decided that they needed to charge us a lot more. And as will happen when you find out that's a lot of work. So the new courier, we had some, we've had some hiccups with them when they started. Things are getting better as far as, loss of books and misdirection of books. However, the timing of books getting to us is still pretty, it's 2 or 3 weeks as opposed to, next week or the following. And I just wanted to remind people that there is a reason that we go 45 days. It does seem like a lot, but it's because it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get to a library, especially the smaller libraries who only have the one pickup. So I just figured I would share that because there are some libraries out there that are still doing a very short pickup, a short return date, and us having to constantly monitor those and say, hey, can we get a renewal on this? Yeah, that's all.
Thank you for bringing up that point, Wendy. I really appreciate it. And I'm curious to hear from folks about what their average time is like if they're also experiencing like a 2 to 3 week turnaround time based on the courier. As I'm learning, I've been getting a sense that it can depend on the amount of stops of like local libraries that you're requesting books from in your community, and the number of stops that they have, and there's a lot of moving parts with what can make it move quickly or slowly. So I'm trying to get a better sense of understanding those moving parts as I settle in, and I really appreciate you bringing up that point. And if folks have experiences with the courier that, they like to chime in, like if other folks are experiencing delays or changes in turnaround times or of any feedback, while it's, Interlibrary Loan Roundtable, I definitely want to have it be like an open forum for any questions about the courier as well.
So much of it is really luck of the draw from where I'm sitting. I mean, we have one pickup a week and it's Wednesday. So if you ask for it Wednesday at noon, it's not going to go out for a week. If you ask for it Monday or Tuesday, you might get it quickly. I mean, there's no, unfortunately, there's no real way to prevent for that.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Scott. Yeah, it seems to depend upon, like, for those 1 day a week libraries, I can see how it's like if the request comes in the day after the delivery, you're adding on a whole other like 6-7 days of turnaround time. I'm looking at a couple of questions in the chat. Sky asks, is there a way to automate the 45-day return dates in Clover, or do we need to manually do it each time? That was running through my mind when I was reading through the best practices document. Like, is this something that folks are having to manually set? I'm going to look into this. I'm curious if there's a default setting in the participant record or an admin that's like buried somewhere. And I'll follow up on that when I do like the meeting summary on the listserv. So I'd be curious to find that out myself. Yeah, and it would be nice for folks, like I think that one library mentioned that, yeah, Alice had mentioned that they send for 60 days. So like it'd be nice for libraries to set a default for folks who are doing like 45, 50, 60. Yeah, the Georgia Public Library says that we get books we order within a week. We have courier stops Tuesday, Thursday. That's reassuring. And Sky has says that we have been getting books quite quickly, less than 2 weeks generally, and we have a 2-day week delivery Tuesday and Thursday. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that it's been working like pretty quickly for folks who are getting more stops, but I see that there's a pattern of slower turnaround times for libraries with one stop. And that I think that can also be impacted if like both the requesting library and the borrowing library are at a one stop a week. Um, and then yes, there's the question of is that in your participant record? That's my hunch is that it's in there, which is the same part of Clover that you go to update your library's email address. I'll double check in there after our meeting and I'll report back on the meeting summary, but that's my hunch too, is that that's where that would be found. Yeah.
Is that the first screen that you showed us when you were giving us the days to respond, the days to supply, and the days to return?
Yes, that's
because that's where
participant.
we have our 60 days in there. And when Clover, we mark it shipped, that's where our 60 days automatically goes. And that matches up with our circulation system so that the due dates are the same. We have
Okay,
ILL
awesome.
libraries set to 60 days so that they get that.
Thanks so much for checking that, Alice, and for your sleuthing. I appreciate that. Yeah, so that's in the participant record. And when I put the meeting summary together, I'll follow up with just like a little bit of a how-to, like how to update your library's email address in the participant record, as well as how to set the parameters for like the return dates. Thank you guys for all of your questions and contributions to the chat. This is great. Let's see. Kat chimed in and said 2 deliveries a week does make things go significantly quicker. We go up twice a week during the summers. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I also want to be mindful that like not every, and this is just coming from me personally, not every library I understand like has the budgetary capacity to have additional stops. So like when I say that adding another delivery day might help the turnaround times. I understand that that's not like an easy thing for everybody to incorporate into their budget. And I do also want to share as an aside that the Courier interest form for libraries who are interested in joining the Courier will be opening up next month in June, and I'll be sending that out on the Courier list. So if folks have questions about that, I'm always happy to help with that too. Let's see. Yeah, Michelle from Fletcher Memorial shares that we added a second stop and it did make us receive books quicker. However, our second stop is very light. Okay, that's good to know too. Kat shares that as a cool future upgrade, it'd be nice if the Clover generated bands could have a note indicating if the book is headed to a courier library or a mail library. I think that would be awesome too. And that's something that I can toss into an enhancement request and send that to Autographics. So anything that's like that, that's coming up in these meetings where there's little features that you would like to see added into Clover, or like for the example that was raised earlier on of the back button that was once there but has since disappeared and we'd like to see back, anything like that that you share either at the roundtable or over email, I can generate that into feedback or a support ticket so that Autographics can consider that for like future updates and enhancements. So I really appreciate those tidbits. And Tenzin chimed in and said, thank you all for sending our book discussion books. When I marked it as ASAP, we receive it pretty quickly. Yeah, that's super appreciated. When I am troubleshooting Clover requests, I'll often see borrower's notes like, hey, this is for a book group. Can you set the due date to this? Or, hey, I have a discussion date coming up on this. Courier libraries only, please. I think notes like that are really helpful. and help like the libraries that have it in their request queue to get a sense of like how to prioritize this. Am I able to accommodate this request? So I think that's great. Georgia Public Library chimed in and said, I believe the default set by the Catamount Consortium is 3 weeks. We rate the due date at 1 month from the date shipped. If folks need a renewal, we're happy to do that if there are no holds for the item. To the best of my knowledge, even if we adjusted the due date in Clover, it will default within Koha to 3 weeks. Okay. And so that's the default for that. I'm just making sense of that. That's the default for the Catamount Consortium. Okay. And so when thinking about the best practices document, if 45 days seems like a good number to have in there for now, we can keep it that way. But if with this conversation, I'm wondering if maybe it makes sense to have a range in there, like 45 to 60, 45 to X. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud a little bit, but it's seeming like the best practices document is fairly straightforward and steady, but that this is something that I might be able to make a little adjustment to. Wendy chimed in and said that we changed the due date in Koha to match the date in Clover. Yes, yes, yes. I think that's awesome. I think that when you have your due dates in Clover aligned with what's in your ILS, it just aligns really nicely, and I think it makes things easier just to keep track of for your due dates. Oh, and Georgia says that they need a lesson. And yes, I'm happy to put something like that together, like a tutorial for sure. Yeah, thank you for asking. That'd be great. Cool. All right. See what I have here on this agenda. So I had like some general questions for you all, and so I'm not gonna share my screen. I'm just gonna read the question that I had. So I received a report from one library that said that they received an incorrect call number on their request. So they had a book that was requested. They accepted the request. It went into their pending. They went to pull the book, and the book that was like on the printout request slip had an incorrect call number. And I checked the library's catalog record, and it was not a cataloging error. So I just wanted to share that this had happened once. I was curious to see if other folks had come across it. And if you do come across it, please feel free to send me like the Clover request number or a screenshot of your request, because this is just something that like has only come up once or twice, but I'm trying to see if there's like a pattern with how it's happening so that I can report back to Autographics and see if there's something that requires a little bit further investigating. So just as like a little thing to think about. I know that there was a pretty significant update made with Autographics over the last week or so. And it's the update to the borrower requests and the lender requests in ILL admin. So I just wanted to quickly like recap what happened in that update. The borrower title browse and the borrower patron browse have since been replaced by Autographics with lender title browse and borrower requests and lender request functions. So I think this might be a good time for me to share my screen just to quickly show you what those look like. And I'm going to go to the State Libraries account, and then I'll start to share my screen. Thanks for your patience. Okay. And so this was something that was a good learning experience for me because I hadn't particularly interacted too frequently in the first couple of months that I've been here with the previous title browse search features. And I really appreciate all of the feedback that folks had shared either on the listserv or to me, like one-on-one with their experiences of the first day that this update was live, some of the quirks. We reached out to Autographics and I compiled the feedback that was submitted by different libraries, and they are taking that into consideration for their future updates to this to these modules. So one thing that I wanted to call attention to is, oh, just one second. Wait for Clover before I start talking. There's an update that's going to be happening tonight. And my interpretation of the update that is happening late in the evening tonight, so that when you log into Clover tomorrow, I wanted to be transparent that they are making a bit of an improvement with this new update. So right now, when you're in this lender requests, if you wanted to update the status of a request in here, you have to head over to edit request record. From the feedback that was provided to me previously, when there was that title search, everything was combined and you were able to update the status of a book in terms of like if it was returned or checked in or whatever from like a little drop down menu that would be over here. Now you have to go over here to edit the request record, and then you would update the status from over here. I have passed along the feedback to Autographics that folks in the Vermont library community were regularly using the drop down ability to update statuses. I personally think that it's really convenient to have it here on this home screen, and Autographics has stated that they are planning to bring that feature back in a future update and that they are prioritizing it on their roadmap. I have not received an exact date yet of when that update will happen, but as soon as I do, I will send a note out on the ILL listserv and let folks know like, hey, this is the date of the update. That drop-down menu is going to be coming back. What they are incorporating in the meantime is that when you log in tomorrow, rather than having to come all the way over to this right side and click on Edit Request Record, the titles in lender and borrower requests will become hyperlinked. So part of me wished that they made that update for last night so that I could show you now, but I'll follow up on the listserv tomorrow about it. And you'll be able to go over here and click right onto the title and be able to access the record in the same way that you would if you were clicking on the pencil. I'm not sure if they're going to keep the pencil or get rid of it, but I had received some reports that if folks didn't have their internet browser at like full screen, you couldn't see the pencil, and we just want that to be simplified and have it to be as accessible for folks as possible. So I shared that feedback with Autographics. Oh, Wendy, I see a hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yeah, are they going to have all of the current open at the top, or are you going to have to go through alphabetically and find all of your open? See, I see all your complete.
Oh,
below.
I see what
Yeah.
you're asking. Let me move my teams over so that you can see this column. So there's a little arrow that appears for each column that you can sort by status. I'm
Oh,
hoping that
good.
I'm answering your question. Does that make sense? So you can
Yes.
sort by accepted renewal, complete. Oh, we have quite a few. This is one of the state library accounts, but there's probably other statuses that if I was to go farther down that I'd be able to see. But with each one of these columns, you can sort by status, alphabetically, ascending and descending. So the arrow will change to let you know like which way you're sorting by. And it looks like you can do that for borrower as well. Yep. Author, request number, if you happen, that might not be too regularly utilized, and you can do title A to Z too. Within these, you can also search by title, in this box here. So like just trying to think of something that would definitely be in there. Nothing about beaches. Well, here we go. Bears, Beaumont, I was like something, right? So yeah, you can see that it'll just give you those couple of titles. And same thing over here at the borrower. If you just wanted to see like a particular book, a particular library's requested items, you could do that.
Okay. Yeah, that I was just seeing that and I was like starting to panic, going, "Oh God."
Yeah. And this is something that I'm just realizing is a feature here while I'm demoing this. I hadn't noticed this little box before. So there's this 3-panel icon, hide or show columns, and it looks like there's even more options that I hadn't been previously aware of. So I'll definitely incorporate this into the meeting summary. But it looks like in addition to the ones that are currently on my screen, like the core, author, borrower, request number, status, and title, you can also elect to toss in some other ones like due date, and it just added in another column. So you can sort your requests by ascending or descending due date. They also have options for format, ISBN, lender's item barcode, the need by date, reason, condition, and request types. So need by date is kind of interesting. If you have a lot of requests and you wanted to sort by the books that libraries are requesting soonest, or like the quote unquote like highest priority requests, that would be maybe a good one to toss in. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to like briefly share what this looks like, and just provide a little bit of context of what you will see when you log into Clover tomorrow morning, which is that all of the titles within lender or borrower requests will be hyperlinked, which is, a step in a positive direction for making this a little bit more user friendly, in my opinion. And I hope it makes it a little bit quicker for your workflows and move a little bit more smoothly for you all too. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, come back. Oh, Kat shared a little tip and says, as a workaround for the back button, you can also navigate to different pages by clicking the hyperlinked names in the top left. ILL admin, lender requests, etc. It's not as efficient, but it's something. So yeah, at the top of your page, there's a sort of almost like a path. It kind of shows you like the page that you're on, and there'll be a couple of arrows. So rather than hitting the back button, you can hit back to go to lender requests or to ILL admin. So that is a good step. And that's something that I can include a little screenshot of when I put out the meeting summary of where on your Clover screen you would see that. And so again, I really appreciate folks' patience with these updates and with reaching out when something isn't making sense, or there's something that has been incorporated into an update that you feel was really something being taken away, which I think was the case with this recent update. So all of the feedback that everyone shared was really helpful and provided me a sense too of someone who's here at the Department of Libraries, of understanding the workflows of different libraries around the state and how often they used those previous title search features. So, thank you for enlightening me about that. And I had, let's see, some other questions. So every month, folks are submitting those courier feedback forms with like their library stats, information about how many books they've shipped. Super appreciate that. There's like a little open comment section in there. And so I compiled just 2 comments that I thought were really relevant to all libraries that I thought I would just quickly read off here. So from recent courier stats forms, a library shared that they would love to see all libraries include a return label in with the book they send or underneath the courier label on the pocket of the bag. Some libraries consistently do not send one, and it stops the workflow to find a label and attach with the paperwork. It seems like a small gesture, but it can go far when a large delivery comes in and we're trying to get things done. So I think that kind of goes back to the conversation we had a little bit ago about book labels within the ILO best practices document. We were reviewing that. So just another thing to think about. And I'll compile, when I send out the meeting summary, some notes about what different libraries are doing for their book labels, so that you can consider what you might want to try at your library. Maybe you can try 1 or 2 different methods and see what's working best for you. And yeah, this was just sort of another one. I say it a lot. This is a quote, not my comment, but a quote from someone on a courier form. I say it a lot, but it would be great if all libraries could send out a label for their stops when they send books. So I think that that was kind of like a theme in recent courier reports was labels, labels, labels. Um, all right. And I had one other item that I'll screen share for showing off of the agenda. All right. So this is just checking in about overdues. I had sent an email out not too long after the last ILL roundtable meeting to the ILL listserv, just sharing some best practices and recommendations for managing overdues in Clover and a couple of requests from the ILL team to the VT ILL community. So I thought I would just briefly go over that and give folks an opportunity to share any feedback or if they have any questions about that email. I know it was from a little while ago. It looks like the end of March, March 21st to March 24th, there was a couple of conversations about this. So I'll just breeze through. Overdue ILL items, we were asking that if folks could please check in on their Clover overdues in your library's borrowing requests. I've been working on a project to reduce a backlog of overdues from non-Clover libraries, out-of-state libraries. I really appreciate everybody's support and checking in on your overdues once in a while. If there's a book that you have a question about, please feel free to reach out anytime, and we're happy to clarify the status of a book, help to troubleshoot in any way. For out-of-state items and items from non-Clover libraries that have recently become overdue, we ask that you please place a renewal request directly in Clover. Any older overdue items may be returned directly to the lending library. If you've sent an email requesting a renewal, that's totally all good. We're happy to take those requests via email too, but I just wanted to share that like you can do it directly from Clover. And so if you place that renewal request as you're going through your overdues, maybe you haven't gone through them in a while, that's okay. If you're seeing items that have just become overdue pretty recently, go ahead and hit that renewal request and we'll pass that request along to the lending library and see if they'll consider. But if it's a older overdue, we do ask that you please send that right back to the lending library at your convenience. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to chime in now or to reach out to me one-on-one, and I'm happy to clarify that. And then moving on down to receiving out-of-state non-Clover library interlibrary loans. We had asked that when you receive an ILL item from an out-of-state library, to please mark the item as received in Clover, and as workflows permit, when possible, to please email the librls@vermont.gov with a note including the OCLC request number. And so this can be something as simple as received and the OCLC request number and leaving the remainder of the body of the email blank. This helps the Vermont Department of Libraries update OCLC records and informs the out-of-state libraries that the Vermont Borrowing Library has received the items as Clover and OCLC do not communicate. There was like some rich discussion and productive discussion on the listserv after this went out, which I really appreciated. And this is not something that is a requirement. It's just something that if you have the capacity to incorporate it in your workflow, that it would be helpful for us. So essentially, we are at times having to backtrack and check catalogs and go from Clover to OCLC to the lending library's catalog to the borrowing library's catalog to see if a book was received or returned. So if it's possible for libraries to do that, if they have the capacity to, it is greatly appreciated. Something that I will follow up with in the meeting summary that has come up since this email was sent out was that if your library is currently doing this, we really appreciate it. If you are unable to do this, one thing that we do ask you to potentially consider is if you're able to email us at that email address when you have a book that's gone to a non-Clover library or an out-of-state library. So for example, your library receives a request from one of the Vermont Department of Libraries Clover accounts for a book, that book goes out, it makes its way back to you. Please make sure that you're marking it as checked in Clover. On our side, we have in our OCLC account a section that's called returned complete question and has like a little question mark. And it's basically a cache of all of the books that have gone out from a Vermont library to an out-of-state library. In theory, they've come back to the Vermont library, but we don't know. So if it's possible for you to please, for any of those types of like out-of-state lens, to update those in Clover so that we know. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to chime in or to ask me one-on-one. But we're just trying to keep better track of those books that Vermont libraries have checked out and then letting the borrowing library know, like, yes, it's back in Vermont, it's back on the shelf, you're good, thank you for everything. And then just kind of closing the request. And then last but not least, for all Clover requests, we are asking that libraries please mark the item as received in Clover as soon as possible after it arrives at your library. We please request that libraries not wait until materials are being shipped to return to complete the step in Clover. So we'll often see, and it's no big deal, but just like a small workflow modification request, sometimes we'll see a book and it'll have a received and a shipped back date as the same day. So if it's possible for folks to let us know that they've received it in Clover as soon as possible, especially if you don't have the capacity to do that additional email step, that way we're able to cross over to the OCLC account and mark it as received there. Essentially, Clover and OCLC do not communicate, so we have the equivalent of a folder like you do in Clover over in OCLC that's received question mark, and the lending libraries from out of state in the OCLC network are wondering if the Vermont libraries have received those books. So this is just a little bit of trying to figure out a workflow to keep those requests updated so that like all parties involved in the lending process can be in the know about where their books are and when. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and that was the last of the like agenda items that I had compiled. So I was just curious if folks have any questions or like feedback about anything that I've reviewed, Clover updates, any thoughts? Oh, I see that Kat shared in the chat. The top of the Middlebury College paperwork will list two numbers with scannable barcodes. The top is the transaction number. The right one below is the OCLC request number you're looking for. That's a great tip. And I do remember that back in March, when the initial correspondence went off on the listserv, Kat had chimed in with like some really great tips for how to like make that process of reporting the books as received really simple and straightforward. This is just kind of coming back to me now. So when I put that meeting summary together, I think I'll go back to Kat's email if that's cool with you, Kat, and I might pull a couple of those tips that you had shared back in March. Thank you. And I'll incorporate that in the meeting summary just when I go over this section about marking books as received and how to make it a little bit easier for everybody. But I really appreciate everybody's like patience as I've been getting settled in and kind of learning the ins and outs of these different systems. It's starting to make sense, and I'm excited to try to figure out ways to like make it work more efficiently for everybody. So thank you. Yeah. So I'll leave it open for like another minute or so if folks have other questions or want to like type anything in the chat. Oh, a question. Yeah, from BPL. Please feel free.
Hi, it's more of a request, I guess, which is just an appeal for folks to please read the borrower's, oh gosh, now that I don't have the field in front of me, borrower's notes.
Yep, borrower's notes.
We really appreciate it. We run a couple of different book clubs and we ask for extended due dates sometimes. Also, we have folks who are, taking college classes or high school classes, and maybe they need a specific translation of a work. Perhaps the lender has more than one translation. We put in the, correct request for the translation we want, but like a little extra note in there maybe could save some time and aggravation on both ends. So just, we appreciate it so much when folks read the borrower's notes. I tried to read the borrower's notes. Please read the borrower's notes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just taking a quick note about your comment about notes. So anyway, yeah, no, I think that's great. I think the borrower's notes are super helpful when I'm troubleshooting requests from Department of Libraries. I'll put comments in the lender's notes to try to like troubleshoot and give feedback. So I think, you know, I'll re-review the best practices document, but if like no one's opposed, I was thinking out loud and considering maybe that's something worth including in the best practices document, not to include borrower's notes, but to please review the borrower and lender's notes on requests as they come in, just to kind of remind folks that they're there. I think that sometimes folks are just like in a workflow, they're in the zone and they're like quickly looking at the requests and not scrolling down, or maybe depending on the size of like your browser window, you might not even see them. So just something to keep in mind. And Kat followed up. Oh, a couple comments actually. Let's see what's going on here. Alice has said that we really appreciate getting the book strap with the scannable Clover number back with the book. It helps to update the returns. Yeah, I think that's great. And Kat agreed that those book straps are super helpful for troubleshooting, especially now the barcode search is also inclusive. Yeah, thank you. Oh, Wendy, please.
I think, book straps are obviously, because of the barcode, it just makes life so much easier. We put book straps on our books as we receive them. If they don't, if they're not included with, it just makes it easier to just hit receive all and print them all out. So then we're putting our book straps on top of book straps if the books have book straps. Anyway, when we print out our book straps, our patrons' names are actually on those book straps and their due dates and all of that stuff. So when we receive the book, we're putting on book straps. But if a book comes in that has a book strap, we don't have the patron's name. We do have the due date of the library that is sending it. But then have we all agreed that the book, I'm sorry, I'm still working on the coffee.
Hey, it's all good. I'm right there with you.
But have we all agreed that the due date on the lending library's book strap is the patron's due date or the library's due date? Number one. And number two, if book straps are that important and everybody would like to see them, can we all agree to either everybody puts their book straps on the book when they receive them, or everybody puts a book strap on a book when they send them? Either or.
Okay, I think those are both
if we want
to
talk about ease, if we're
Yeah.
all on the same page and we're all doing the same thing, then it's going to save everybody time. Because it doesn't save me time Kat sends them out with book straps. That's great. I love that we have a book strap, but we still are going to print out our own book strap because it's just part of the, we all do part of the workflow. But if everybody is sending us a book strap, then we don't have to do that. Now we're just writing the name of the patron on the book
Okay.
strap. But then we talk about, well, we're all libraries, so I guess no, because then it goes through priority. See, this is how my brain works. Now we're talking about privacy. So, yeah, sorry.
No, don't apologize. I think that's a great question. Not
that's
at all.
how my brain works.
That's totally cool.
But yeah, I love the fact that, I think we all love book straps, but I think it's a matter of, when it actually happens and, if we all agreed to do them when we're sending them out or agreed to do them just when we got them,
Okay.
which would create more work for other people. But yeah, anyhow, I present for your for your consideration.
Well, I want to make sure because I don't think I have an answer right now for like the bigger question, but I think I might have an answer for your first question. I just want to make sure I understood it correctly first before I attempt to answer it, which was that when you receive a book strap, there's a due date that's printed on it coming from the lending library. And I believe your question was, would that also be then your borrowing library's due date and the patron's due date?
Right. Well,
In
as
theory,
we,
yes, but I would say always go by the due date that's in Clover because we're taking the due date from OCLC if it's an OCLC routed request and putting that over in Clover, if that makes sense.
sure. And the explanation being that when we print out our book strap, it gives us a different due date. And that due date is 1 week prior to the lending library's due date because the patron needs to get it back to us so that we can get it into our delivery to get it back to the library by the library's due date, the lending library's due date. So I at one point we were all discussing this and I don't recall if we ever landed on an agreement or, is that due date in Clover for the patron or is that due date in Clover for us, the library?
I see what you're asking. The due date in Clover, I would say, is for the library in that respect. So, like, if you feel that, or not if you feel like, just in general workflows, if it makes sense to give a due date to the patron that's like a week or maybe 10 days before that due that's in Clover to make sure that you have the extra time to get it back to you. Yes, this is starting to make more sense. Yeah, so the due date that's in Clover, yeah, is for the library.
Yeah, so my book strap, when we're talking about the book straps and how easy they are, my book strap has a different due date than Kat's. So when Kat sends me a book that has a due date on it, if I just use her book strap, then and give that to the patron, then the patron is saying, oh, that's my due date. And then Kat's not going to get it back for at least a week or two later because of the delivery stuff.
I see
Unless
what
Kat
you're
has
saying.
several stops during the week now. But
No, I
yeah,
see. Yeah. And it would be tedious to go to Clover and then Sharpie and scribble out and rewrite the due date. And yeah, I'm like trying to think of ways to resolve this like out loud. I think that this is something that I'm definitely going to look into a little bit more. And I think I'm going to go back through some other like roundtable summaries and some of the recordings and get a sense of like some of the previous conversations about this. To be completely honest, it's been a couple of years since I've been at the Manchester Community Library, like processing ILLs. And I remember putting book straps together and I've been like trying to visualize what my workflow was a few years ago. But I think this is a good opportunity for me to like learn about how the libraries are like actively processing the ILLs and the role that the book strap plays in getting the book from A to B and the information that's on it. So I'm really glad that you brought this up. This is something that I definitely want to look into like at more detail so that I can provide a little bit more of guidance about best practices. So
Right. Yeah,
I'll be
because I think
reporting
that
back.
I think that we all agree that book straps are really great as far as workflow. However, there are some little bumps that plus the fact that there are how many people on ILL and there are only 17 people here talking about it. So that's the
Yeah,
other. Yeah.
absolutely. No, I think it'd be a good like larger question to bring up as a for the group on the listserv for sure. Thank you,
Yay.
Wendy.
Sure.
And some folks have been chiming in about your question in the comments. So I'm just gonna like I'm gonna catch up and read some of these out loud here so that we can talk about them. Kat shared, when we get wayward shipments, those book straps make things so much easier in terms of troubleshooting, for sure. But I get it if she says, I get it if your library isn't set up for that regular printing. I'm happy with the sticky note if it has a request number, TBH, to be honest. I'll take what I can get for documentation. Yeah. And oh, Sky followed up with a question. Bookstrap placement question. Is it equivalent to put the bookstrap inside the book, or do people prefer it to be attached, strapped onto the book? Anyone have thoughts on that? or like your personal preferences at your library. It looks like Kat chimed in and said that Middlebury bands it to the front, RML bands it to the back. Tenzin, who I believe is up at Fletcher, I think so, says that we put book straps that we received inside the book and then slap ours on the book. Michelle at Fletcher Memorial says that we use our COHA rules for lending 3 week when the ILL gets to us so the patron receives a receipt and it is on their record with the due date. They have been great with it. BPL shares that I agree that the book strap helps me keep things straight and are helpful if when there's a mix-up. I'm the only person in our library who processes ILL and I don't have time to do incoming book straps, only outgoing straps as a lender. When the book comes in for a patron, I add a sticky note with their name and due date. I then take it off before returning. So I think that those are some different workflows that people are incorporating right now. I really appreciate all of the notes that folks have been sharing in the chat, and I'll be incorporating those into the meeting summary that I share on the listserv and put on the website. So thanks for all of your tips that folks have been sharing. This is great. And Noreen has a hand raised. Noreen, please, I'd love to hear your question or your feedback.
Everything, there's been so much going on. I prefer sending a book strapped on because I don't I don't have access to a printer on my floor so for me to send out a book strap, that makes a lot of extra work for us. And like Wendy, we put on all our book straps for the patrons when we receive the book, and that way I take that off before I send it back so that the patron's name isn't associated with the book. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
that is helpful. Yeah, thank you, Noreen. And Kat shared too about her book straps. At the college, we use them as pickup slips. I haven't tried to do that through Clover, but I think it is possible to print the bands without fully shipping the item. That's a good question, and I'll look into that in Clover, and I'll follow up in the meeting summary with an answer for that. I'm just not sure offhand, but that would be great if you could, yeah. And Tammy says that Springfield uses book straps for books received only. So this is interesting to think about too, like the workflow potential of using it for books that you're just lending or books that you're borrowing. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think I'll look a little bit more about book straps, review some of the previous ILL discussions, and then maybe like pose like a larger question for like the listserv's consideration. And maybe that would be something worth incorporating into the best practices document. Maybe not. I'm not quite sure, as this is all kind of new to me, but I think it's definitely something worth considering. And I'm curious to learn a little bit more about it, for sure. Being that it's been a little bit since I've worked with a book strap. Oh, do you have
I also
please.
recognize that we all, we're all different size libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of you have an actual ILL department and some of us are doing everything.
Yeah.
Incoming, outgoing, we're cataloging, we're greeting patrons, we're, telling the kids to use their library voices and still trying to focus. So, I mean, it is different for everybody, but I think that if we all land on something that might work for everybody, I think it would just be really, really helpful for all of us, beneficial for all of us.
I completely agree. Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'll start making some steps to get us to that place. Cool. Well, that was, sort of the core agenda items that I had. We've gone through, but I was curious if folks had any other questions or comments. I don't want to wrap up early, but I don't want to keep folks too long too if we're feeling like we've covered things. And Kat comments and says, "Go tiny libraries, we are here for you." Absolutely. Yeah, we're here to support libraries, big and small. And I think that's really part of what makes Vermont's library community so unique. We've got like 185 public libraries, so many different sizes, different size teams, different workflows, academic libraries, school libraries. So it's really awesome when folks can take the time to come together so we can hear these perspectives from different librarians, and it really helps me to learn a lot too as I'm settling into this position. And Sky says, "Thank you all for your patience and help as ILL questions come up." Oh, of course. Yeah, we're so here for you. And these first couple of months, I just celebrated my 3-month work mark here at the Department of Libraries, and it's really special, and I really appreciate like the questions that have been coming in because I feel more rooted in my position than I did a couple of months ago. I think a huge part of that is the questions that have come up have led me to like dive into these different workflows, put myself in the point of view of a librarian who's like actively working on a ILL and putting myself in their place and trying to provide like user-friendly support to make sure that they can do their jobs in a way that feels good, in a way that they feel supported. So, that's really what my goal is, and I really appreciate everybody's patience with me as I've been like learning, because there are some times where it takes me like a little bit of time to figure out the answer, but I always do my best. So, thanks very much for your support. And thank you for the congratulations in the comments. I really appreciate that too. It's very sweet. Yeah, awesome. Well, if folks, don't have any other questions, that's totally all good. I really appreciate everybody taking the time to come and join me today for the ILL roundtable. Our next meeting is in person, and I jotted down the date. Let's see where that is. August 12th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that one will be at the Vermont Department of Libraries. I will be reaching out with some additional information about um, like the location where the meeting space will be, wayfinding, putting together an agenda. This will be, my first roundtable in person, so I really look forward to meeting folks in person and having a chance to like get together. And I'm still kind of workshopping what that meeting will look like, and I'm open to any ideas. So if folks have thoughts on like agenda items or things that you'd like to see happen at the annual like in-person roundtable meeting, I'm all ears. So please feel free to reach out with any suggestions. And today's meeting has of course been recorded, so I'll plan to get that recording like edited down. That'll get shared on the Vermont Department of Libraries YouTube, and that link will be available on the ILL Roundtable like webpage on the department website. As always, well, not as always, but as I'll always do in the future, and as I did after the last roundtable, I'll send a link out on the ILL listserv with like a meeting summary and some notes, a link to the recording, a link to the website. Um, I just was laughing at the comment that came up: in person, ILL is fully catered. I'll see what I can do. I can definitely promise snacks, but I'll definitely see what I can do. That'd be a blast. But I really look forward to seeing everybody like in person. And oh yeah, VLA is like less than a week away, so folks will be at the Vermont Library Association conference. I will be tabling and sharing, I believe, a slide off of the Vermont Department of Libraries presentation. So please feel free to come by the Department of Libraries table. We'd love to say hello. We'd love to hear your questions or just to chat and say hi. Whatever's up, we're here for it. Yeah, looking forward to that for sure. So yeah, thanks everybody. And I really, again, I so appreciate you taking the time. It's awesome that like so many folks took time out of like a really nice sunny day to get together and chat about ILL. Yeah, that's great. So yeah. So I think with that, I'll wrap up today's ILL roundtable meeting. And as always, if folks have questions, it's great to bring items to like the roundtable meeting, but feel free, like you can reach out to me anytime at my email address. If you have a question for the Department of Libraries in general, but it's not interlibrary loan related, we have a contact form on our website there's also the lib.contact@vermont.gov. And so that's like a great catch-all if you have a question that's not about ILL land, but it's about something else and you're not quite sure where it's supposed to go. So there's always, staff here at the Department of Libraries that are happy to support and help you with whatever you're working on. So please continue to share your questions, your comments, your feedback. I'm here for you. I really want to support the ILL community in any and every way that I can as I'm, growing into this position here. So thank you for your support and thank you for supporting me. Really appreciate it. And I hope everybody has an awesome rest of your day and enjoy the sunshine.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. Take care, everyone.